She ripped his invitation in half without reading it, then dropped it in the trash and told him to stop pretending to belong here. That was her exact line. He was in a full suit, quiet, polite, standing in the lobby of a building that claimed to stand for justice, inclusion, and equality. But none of that mattered. Not to her, not to the guard, not to the manager who walked downstairs 5 minutes later and pointed to the door. "This isn't a place for hopefuls," he said. "Get him out." They didn't know his name. They didn't ask why he was invited. They didn't care that they were turning away the one man with the legal power to bring their entire company to its knees. And he didn't raise his voice. He didn't protest. He just looked at them, silent, still, and watching. What happens when the man they humiliated turns out to be the one holding their fate in his hands? This is the story of how justice doesn't always knock. Sometimes it walks in quietly, waits and listens. Now tell us, what would you have done if you saw this happening? Leave your answer in the comments. Also, where are you watching from? Let us know below. And if you want more stories like this, where the underestimated rise and the powerful fall, subscribe now. Because this story, the morning light cast a soft golden hue on the steel and glass tower that loomed above downtown Chicago, its reflective windows gleaming like polished armor. Marcus Holloway stood at the curb outside the high-rise, adjusting the cuffs of his navy blue suit jacket, his polished shoes clicking faintly against the pavement as he approached the front steps. To an observer, he was unremarkable in the best way, well-groomed, confident, precise, but not flashy. He carried no briefcase, only a slim leather folio tucked under one arm. As he neared the rotating doors, a doorman in a charcoal coat gave him a once-over and hesitated, stepping into his path. "Deliveries go around the back, sir," the man said, his tone clipped but not hostile, like someone reciting protocol. Marcus blinked once, not in surprise, but in quiet recognition. He smiled politely. "I'm not here for a delivery," Marcus replied. "I have a meeting on the 25th floor." The doorman squinted. "With who?" Marcus tilted his head slightly. "That information is with the front desk. May I go through?" The man hesitated, then stepped aside reluctantly, as if granting passage out of courtesy rather than right. Marcus stepped into the lobby, greeted by cold marble floors and the sterile hum of fluorescent lighting. The reception area was sleek, white countertops, chrome fixtures, and a modern art sculpture twisting toward the ceiling like a frozen flame. Behind the desk, a young woman in a blazer the color of bone watched him approach. She glanced at him, then at his folio, and her expression shifted. "May I help you?" she asked, not unkindly, but with an edge of suspicion that mirrored the doorman's. Marcus offered a warm smile. "Yes, I'm here for an appointment." "The name's Marcus Holloway." She tapped on her keyboard, then paused. "And you're with which company?" "I'm not with a company," he said evenly. "I was invited." There was a pause, longer than it needed to be. Her eyes flicked to the folio again, then back to his face. "I see," she murmured, then pressed a button on her headset. "Security. Can you confirm if there's a Holloway scheduled for a guest pass today?" Marcus didn't flinch. He expected this, anticipated it. Still, it stung in a way he couldn't quite ignore. The receptionist avoided his gaze as she waited for a response. Behind him, a tall man in a gray three-piece suit stepped up to the other side of the desk. "Morning, Kristen," he said with a practiced smile. "Good morning, Mr. Langford," she chirped. "Top floor today?" "Of course," he said, flashing a keycard. "Don't want to keep the board waiting." The reader beeped affirmatively, and the turnstile unlocked. Langford nodded to Marcus briefly, then disappeared behind the glass doors. The receptionist looked back at Marcus with forced neutrality. "Security says you're not registered. Are you sure you have the right address?" "I'm certain," he said, voice low and calm. She gave him a faint smile. "It happens. We get a lot of folks who come to the wrong building. If you want to wait outside—" "Wait," interrupted a deep voice behind him. A uniformed security guard, stocky and serious, approached the desk. "What's the problem here?" "He's not on the guest list," the receptionist said simply. The guard turned to Marcus. "You got an ID?" Marcus reached into his jacket and produced his driver's license, which the guard examined too long before handing it back. "I'm just going to ask you directly," the guard said. "You here for a delivery? Or maybe maintenance?" Marcus looked the man in the eye. "Neither. I'm here to meet someone." Another long pause. The guard frowned. "Well, I don't see any pass issued. You can't hang around here, sir. Company policy." A few steps away, a young woman in a pencil skirt and red heels hovered near the elevators. She watched the exchange from afar, her expression unreadable. Marcus noticed her, but gave no indication. Instead, he turned back to the receptionist. "Would you mind calling Robert Hargrove's office?" he asked gently. "I believe they're expecting me." That name changed the temperature. The receptionist blinked. "Mr. Hargrove, the CFO?" Marcus nodded once. She hesitated, then dialed. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she explained the situation, occasionally casting glances at Marcus as if verifying that yes, he was still standing there. A beat passed. Then another. Finally, she hung up. "I'm sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "Mr. Hargrove's team isn't responding. Without clearance, I can't let you up." The guard took a step closer. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Marcus didn't move. "I'm happy to wait in the seating area." The guard crossed his arms. "This isn't a lounge, sir. It's a corporate lobby. I'm not asking again." And then, from the elevators, came the sound of a bell. The doors opened. A man in a tailored navy suit stepped out, mid-40s, graying at the temples, eyes sharp. He scanned the lobby and froze when his gaze landed on Marcus. "Marcus," he said, surprised. Marcus turned. "Daniel." The guard and receptionist blinked in unison as Daniel Shaw, head of legal affairs, crossed the floor swiftly and extended a hand. "I didn't know you were coming today." "Nobody told me," he said with a half smile. "Wasn't meant to be announced," Marcus replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Thought I'd stop by." Daniel turned to the receptionist. "He's with me. Guest pass isn't necessary. He has full clearance." The silence was deafening. The receptionist nodded quickly, her posture stiff. The guard stepped back, his jaw clenched. Marcus followed Daniel through the turnstile. As they walked, he didn't look back, but he could feel their eyes following him. They always did. The elevator hummed softly as it ascended, Marcus standing beside Daniel in stiff silence, the air between them charged with an undercurrent of something unspoken. When the doors opened onto the 25th floor, a corridor stretched out ahead, walls lined with abstract art and soft recessed lighting, the hush of corporate power humming just beneath the surface. Daniel led the way past a series of glass-walled offices where suited professionals glanced up from monitors or glanced quickly away, and Marcus followed without hesitation, his footsteps steady despite the eyes tracking his every move. They reached a door marked Executive Conference Suite B, and Daniel pushed it open, revealing a long oak table surrounded by leather chairs. "Wait here," Daniel said with a tight nod. "I'll grab someone from the team." Marcus gave a simple nod in return and entered the room alone. He didn't sit. He remained standing, glancing around, absorbing the space with a quiet calm that bordered on reverence. Not 5 minutes passed before the door burst open again, not with Daniel, but with a woman in her early 50s, angular features tight with indignation, her heels clacking sharply against the hardwood. She carried herself with the authority of someone long accustomed to command. Her nameplate still clipped to her lapel read Marjorie Kessler VP, Finance Division. She didn't offer a greeting, her eyes fixed on Marcus like a spotlight. "You again," she snapped. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this floor is not open for solicitation." Marcus raised an eyebrow, still composed. "Excuse me." She walked up to him, stopping only inches away. "You people think just because you put on a nice suit, you can bluff your way into our meetings. I don't know how you got past reception, but this ends now." Without waiting for a response, she turned and marched back into the hallway. Moments later, a security guard appeared, not the same one from the lobby, but taller, bulkier, younger, clearly summoned. "Sir," he began, his tone heavy with rehearsed patience, "I've been asked to escort you out." Marcus didn't budge. Instead, he calmly reached into his folio and pulled out a crisp, embossed envelope, sealed with a corporate watermark. Without a word, he extended it toward the guard. Confused, the guard took it and turned to Marjorie, who had re-entered the room with arms folded tightly across her chest. The guard opened the envelope and pulled out a letter of appointment, formal, official, signed by the company's CEO himself, inviting Marcus Holloway to attend a private leadership panel hosted by the executive board. Marjorie's eyes flicked across the page, and for the briefest moment, the color drained from her face. But she recovered quickly, snatched the letter from the guard's hand, and without reading further, ripped it cleanly in half. The sound echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. She dropped the pieces into the trash bin beside her with deliberate ease. "Don't play charades in my department," she said coldly. "We've had enough scammers trying to crash board meetings with fake letters." "That wasn't fake," Marcus replied, his voice still calm but with a quiet steel beneath. "That letter was signed by Mr. Eddington himself." Marjorie let out a bitter chuckle. "Oh, is that right? Then maybe next time you should bring someone who actually knows you. Until then," she turned to the guard, "get him out. Now." The guard hesitated. The pieces of the letter lay in the bin like silent witnesses. Before he could act, hurried footsteps echoed from the corridor. A young intern, barely older than 20, came running, breathless, eyes wide. "Ms. Kessler," she gasped, "Mr. Shaw is on his way back. He said to wait, that there's been a mistake." Marjorie turned sharply. "What mistake?" "He said Mr. Holloway is here for the panel. His name was just added this morning. Something about a late change from legal." Marcus didn't say a word. He simply looked at Marjorie. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't back down. "Tell Daniel to bring me that confirmation personally," she snapped, brushing past the intern. She glared back at Marcus. "Don't move." He didn't. He had no reason to. The tension rippled through the air like heat rising off asphalt. The guard shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to act or retreat. Marcus turned slowly and retrieved the shredded letter from the bin. He didn't reassemble it. He didn't need to. Instead, he placed it gently back into his folio and waited. Moments later, Daniel returned, confused, flanked by another executive, this one taller, broader-shouldered, with a heavy gold watch and a frown that deepened as he saw Marcus still standing near the table. "What's going on?" the man demanded. Marjorie gestured wildly. He showed up with some fabricated letter, claiming he's on the guest list. "I had no choice but to." Daniel cut her off. "Marcus is supposed to be here. The change came from the top. It's all cleared." The silence was brutal. Even the guard looked away. Marjorie's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "No one told me." "Well," said the other executive dryly, "maybe you should check your messages before humiliating guests." Marjorie stiffened, but before she could speak, Daniel turned to Marcus. "I'm sorry. I should have handled this myself. Please come with me." Marcus followed him silently out of the room, the guard stepping aside like a statue springing to life. But as he passed the bin again, Marcus paused, not to look down, but to look back. Not at Daniel, not at the intern, at Marjorie. Their eyes met only for a second, but in that second, something passed between them. She hadn't just tried to remove him. She had erased him, torn apart a document bearing his name, his invitation, his legitimacy, and discarded it without blinking. That wasn't error. That was choice. And choices have weight. The sky had shifted by the time Marcus stepped back outside. Rain starting as a whisper, then swelling into a steady, persistent drizzle that coated the granite steps in a silvery sheen. He stood just beneath the overhang of the building's front archway, hands calmly folded in front of him, his expression unreadable as water speckled the shoulders of his suit. His leather folio was tucked tightly beneath his arm to shield it from the damp, though it too had absorbed a few drops, the edges curling slightly at the corners. Passers-by hurried past with umbrellas and raincoats, some barely registering his presence, others glancing briefly, then looking away, as if contact might invite complication. Behind the glass doors, he could still make out the reception area. Warm, dry, ordered. A different world from the one he now found himself separated from by just 2 inches of glass and an ocean of presumption. A few minutes passed before movement to his left caught his attention. A man in khakis and a wrinkled blazer jogged up the stairs, holding his phone to his ear with one hand, a canvas messenger bag slung across his chest. He was white, mid-30s, stubble along his jawline, and clearly in a hurry. He didn't slow down as he approached the entrance. No badge, no ID, no hesitation. The guard inside glanced up, recognized him, and gave a casual nod before the man disappeared through the revolving doors without breaking stride. Marcus watched this unfold without expression, the contrast slicing through the rain like a blade. Moments later, the same guard stepped outside, holding a clipboard shielded under a plastic sleeve. He squinted at Marcus, as if uncertain he'd seen him before. "Can I help you?" he asked. Marcus didn't react at first, then gave a small nod. "We met earlier. You asked for my ID." The guard frowned. Right. And you're still waiting?" "Briefly," Marcus replied. "They asked me to wait while they sorted out a change upstairs." The guard glanced at the folio, then back at Marcus. "Mind showing me that ID again? Just to double-check." Marcus didn't speak. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and produced the same license, now slightly damp from the rain, and handed it over with deliberate calm. The guard stared at it for a beat, then nodded and handed it back without apology. "Appreciate it," he muttered before retreating inside. Marcus exhaled slowly, tucking the ID away, his fingers lingering on the inside lining of his jacket for just a second longer than needed. He turned and re-entered the building once more, the warmth of the lobby feeling almost false against his chill skin. Kristen, the receptionist from earlier, shot him a quick glance but didn't speak. This time, Marcus didn't head toward the elevators. He made his way toward a side waiting area just past the main desk, a small nook designed for visitors, with a cluster of leather chairs, a sleek coffee table, and a few neatly stacked magazines featuring quarterly business journals and architecture spreads. He sat near the edge, his posture straight, placing his folio gently on the table before him. The room wasn't busy, just 1 or 2 others seated farther down, one reading a newspaper, another nursing a coffee and scrolling on their phone. Marcus folded his hands together and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. The silence wasn't oppressive, it was deliberate, curated, muffled by design. He glanced toward the glass wall that faced the building's interior courtyard, where the rain danced softly against manicured greenery. He could see his reflection in the glass, not quite distinct, just a silhouette, waiting. The receptionist's phone buzzed quietly, and she answered in a practiced murmur. Moments later, a man in a tailored charcoal vest approached. He was tall, angular, with a clean-shaven face and a jaw locked with the tension of someone always in control. He scanned the room briefly before walking over to Marcus. "Excuse me," the man said coolly. "You're?" "Marcus Holloway," he replied. "Legal department asked me to wait here." The man nodded, though his tone didn't shift. "Right. I'm Nathan, facility manager. We've had a few concerns." "Concerns?" Marcus asked, still seated. "We're getting reports that the seating area is crowded. Some of our team members feel it's not ideal to have unfamiliar individuals seated so close during their breaks, particularly during meal service." Marcus looked around the half-empty space, then back to Nathan. "Is that so?" Nathan's lips twitched. "This is a hospitality-driven environment. We just want to keep things orderly." He turned slightly, signaling a nearby janitorial staff member. "Please clear the table. Remove the service tray." The staff, a young woman in uniform, hurried over and removed a tray from the table beside Marcus, which held untouched croissants, a sealed water bottle, and a linen napkin. She looked apologetic, but said nothing. Marcus watched as the items were cleared, then turned his gaze back to Nathan. "Did someone complain?" he asked. Nathan hesitated. "We've just received some feedback. And with the rain, some assumed you might have been a walk-in. Happens more than you think." "And what do I look like?" Marcus asked softly. Nathan blinked. "Excuse me. You said people assumed I was a walk-in. I'm wondering what made them assume that." Nathan's jaw tightened. It's not personal. We're just trying to manage the space appropriately. If you wouldn't mind relocating to the atrium side, it's more open and less disruptive. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He looked again at the spotless room. There are 6 empty chairs here. No one is eating, and I've been silent the entire time. Still, Nathan said with a tone of finality, it's best if we avoid discomfort. For everyone's sake. Marcus stood slowly. His eyes didn't leave Nathan's. I'll wait where I was told to wait, until I hear otherwise. Suit yourself, Nathan muttered, turning sharply and walking away. The janitorial worker paused before leaving. Sorry, sir, she said softly. She trailed off. Marcus gave a small nod. I know. And then he sat again, the seat now colder, the air sharper. As another minute passed and the distance between him and this place grew not in steps, but in silence. Marcus remained seated, still and deliberate, though the space around him had subtly shifted. The once neutral waiting area now felt colder, the distant clinking of coffee cups and elevator chimes sounding more like punctuation marks in an invisible conversation he was no longer part of. The janitorial worker had long retreated, and the polished silence returned with a faint hum of air conditioning overhead. He glanced at the wall clock, still no word. His patience, honed over years of enduring long meetings, red-eye flights, and late-night negotiations, was not the issue. It was the realization that every passing minute in that chair seemed to validate their suspicion, not his presence. Across the lobby, a pair of employees stepped out of the elevator, chatting quietly. One of them, a young man with a lanyard badge swinging over his button-down shirt, caught sight of Marcus and momentarily hesitated mid-step. His gaze lingered for a second too long before he turned to his companion, a woman with a laptop pressed to her chest, and muttered something under his breath. She responded with a raised brow, following his eyes toward Marcus. Her lips curved into a faint smirk before she whispered back, I mean, he's been there for a while. Who just sits there without talking to anyone? The young man shrugged. Maybe he's lost. Or just, waiting to be escorted. The woman chuckled lightly. Or pretending. You'd be surprised how often people fake their way into buildings like this. He's dressed well, but still doesn't fit. They didn't approach. They didn't question. They moved past the reception desk and disappeared through the glass doors, their footsteps echoing faintly as the receptionist glanced up and then away, uninterested. Marcus heard the exchange, not because they had been loud, but because they hadn't cared to lower their voices enough. He didn't flinch. He merely folded his hands together and leaned back slightly, watching the slow rotation of the ceiling fan blades, as if timing his breath to their rhythm. Moments later, the same guard from earlier returned, clipboard now gone, hands in his pockets. He stood beside Marcus, looking down with a sigh that sounded more tired than stern. Still here? Marcus looked up at him calmly. They asked me to wait. The guard scratched the back of his head. Look, I don't want trouble, all right? Just doing what I'm told. But it's been a while. No confirmation came down. No one from the upper floors asked for a hallway. Marcus didn't move. Someone will. The guard gave a half shrug. Okay, but I gotta ask again. You sure you're not with facilities? You don't look like someone usually expected for meetings up there. Marcus arched an eyebrow. What do I look like? The guard blinked, then hesitated. I didn't mean it like that. It's just protocol. Certain guests, certain looks, certain expectations. That's all I'm saying. So it's not the suit? Marcus said softly. Or the silence. It's me. The guard didn't answer right away. He shifted uncomfortably. Look, I've had people try to sneak in before. All right? Some come in claiming they know a guy. Flash a fake letter. Walk in like they belong. Makes me suspicious. Not personal. Just the job. Marcus nodded once, his expression unreadable. Suspicion isn't the problem. Assumption is. The guard looked as if he might respond, then simply turned away, murmuring something about checking the desk before drifting back toward the reception. A few minutes passed. A junior employee, clearly an intern based on the temp badge clipped awkwardly to her blouse, walked through the area carrying 2 cups of coffee on a tray. She slowed briefly as she noticed Marcus, hesitated, then picked up her pace. Behind her, 2 more associates were in conversation. One of them, a tall man in a slim gray suit, spotted Marcus and paused mid-sentence. "Is that the guy people are talking about?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, but sharp with curiosity. The woman with him followed his gaze. "Oh yeah," she murmured. "He's been here since like an hour ago. Nobody knows who invited him." The man leaned in slightly. "He a vendor? Consultant?" "No idea," the woman said, lowering her voice. "But people are saying he's just waiting around, pretending to be expected." The man shook his head. "That's awkward. Poor guy. But hey, might be a scam. Could be anyone with a good tailor and confidence." The woman smirked. "Well, he's got the confidence part down. Just doesn't really blend in." Their words faded as they continued past, never making eye contact with Marcus, as if acknowledging his awareness would somehow legitimize his presence. Another assistant passed by moments later and glanced toward Marcus with a furrowed brow. He paused near the front desk and whispered to Kristen, gesturing discreetly. She nodded and responded quietly, glancing toward Marcus again before returning to her screen. From where he sat, Marcus could see their gestures, their expressions, the way lips formed sentences that didn't need to be spoken aloud to be understood. There was no confrontation, no argument, no accusations. Just that quiet consensus among the unbothered, that he did not belong, that he was an error in the frame, that the static in the system must eventually be filtered out. Even the warmth of the room now felt different, manufactured, hostile in its indifference. Marcus adjusted his sleeve and checked his watch once more, not because he was impatient, but because it was a habit formed from years of schedules, appointments, and boardroom briefings. But this moment wasn't about time. It was about what time revealed. The longer he waited, the clearer it became. Silence wasn't neutrality here. It was compliance. And everyone had signed the unspoken agreement. The moment came not with shouting or a dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet finality of a closed door and the soft click of indifference. Marcus had barely lifted his head when the second guard arrived. This one bulkier, older, his presence radiating resolve rather than malice. There was no anger in his tone, just cold procedure as he placed a hand near Marcus's shoulder and said, "Sir, we've been asked to escort you out. Please come with me." There was no negotiation, no delay, no call from above to halt the process this time. The silence from the upper floors had become an answer in itself. Marcus stood without resistance, gathered his folio, and walked through the lobby one final time, past the receptionist who didn't meet his eyes, past the interns pretending to check their phones, past the pair of glass doors that had once opened to opportunity and now closed behind him like a verdict. The sun outside had risen high into the sky since morning, and now it burned hot over the concrete, reflecting harshly off the sleek surfaces of the corporate tower. Marcus stepped down the front steps slowly, the guard behind him offering no words, only the constant weight of presence, as if escorting not a guest, but a liability. He reached the bottom of the stairwell, but as he turned to reorient himself, a gust of wind surged unexpectedly from the side alley, sharp and dry, slicing across the plaza and catching the edge of his folio. The flap lifted, loose papers suddenly fluttering like startled birds. A cascade of printed letters, typed memos, and clipped legal summaries scattering across the stone steps. The folio tumbled from his grip entirely, landing flat against the pavement with a dull thud. Marcus knelt to retrieve it, his hand catching a single sheet before it could drift beyond reach, but the rest danced freely in the wind, sheets tumbling down the steps, slipping beneath metal benches, pinwheeling toward the curb like lost fragments of authority. Passers-by watched, some slowing slightly, but none stopped. 2 suited professionals at the nearby food cart looked over briefly, then resumed their lunch orders. A woman with a briefcase stepped around a paper without breaking stride, eyes forward. A courier paused his bike, adjusted his headphones, and rode on. Marcus crouched there, one knee on hot stone, reaching calmly for each page as if plucking back pieces of something sacred. Each document bore a name, a number, a seal, records of board meetings, financials, executive approvals, strategic planning summaries, all of which he had reviewed and annotated personally. And now, these artifacts lay underfoot, discarded and unseen. A breeze lifted the corner of one page and flipped it over, exposing a letterhead embossed with the emblem of the very corporation behind him. He reached for it slowly, fingers brushing the textured print, reclaiming the final piece. When he stood, he took a moment to adjust his jacket, brushing dust from a lapel, straightening the tie that had shifted in the wind. He looked upward, following the full vertical stretch of the building's mirrored facade. 25 stories of glass and power looming above him. And there, draped across the second-story balcony like a ribbon of virtue, hung a massive banner, crisp, white, and proud. In bold navy blue lettering, it read, "Diversity in Action, Building a Just Future for All." Below it, smaller text declared, "We are committed to inclusion, equality, and respect across all communities." The irony struck him not like a dagger, but like a slow, hollow drumbeat. He stared at the banner for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Beneath the sign, employees passed back and forth behind the glass walls, some laughing, some arguing over screens, others glancing occasionally toward the window without ever seeing what stood beneath it. Marcus stepped back, positioning himself directly in line with the banner's shadow. It fell over him like a veil, soft, barely noticeable, but unmistakable if one knew where to look. He stood there, documents now secure again inside the folio, eyes trained not on the people, but on the image they had chosen to display, as if mission statements could erase history and slogans could shield truth. Behind him, the guard lingered at the door for a moment longer, then turned and stepped back inside, letting the heavy glass doors close once more, cutting off the noise of the street with a smooth hiss. Alone now, Marcus turned away from the building, moving not hurriedly, but with deliberation. The plaza stretched before him, open, sun-bleached, and uncaring. The same wind that had scattered his papers earlier now toyed with the edges of his collar. But he didn't lift a hand to stop it. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of a city hummed on, horns, engines, footsteps, fragments of laughter and frustration. But here, in this hollowed space beneath a sign that meant nothing, everything had become still. He walked a few steps forward, then paused, as if considering where to go next, or perhaps who he needed to become before stepping forward again. Marcus took slow, measured steps across the open plaza, letting the heat soak into his shoulders and the tension settle in his spine like a weight he no longer tried to resist. The building rose behind him, glass shimmering in the sun like it had nothing to hide. Each footfall echoed across the granite, not loud enough to attract attention, but certain enough to command it if anyone cared to listen. He reached the edge of the garden strip that wrapped around the tower, a narrow patch of artificial serenity lined with trimmed hedges and stainless steel benches polished to reflect the sky. He paused near one of them, resting a hand briefly on the cold metal backrest. His fingers lingered there, not out of fatigue but out of habit. He had once sat on this very bench years ago, on a different morning, with a different nameplate on his chest and 1,000 smaller dreams tucked into the inside pocket of his coat. The scent of fresh mulch wafted faintly in the breeze, masking the memory of copier ink and burnt coffee from days long past. As he stood there, letting the silence thicken around him, a low mechanical hum emerged from behind the column to his left, followed by the slow screech of rubber wheels turning. He turned his head just slightly and saw him. A janitor in his late 60s, skin weathered, uniform sun-faded, a rusted cart trailing behind him stacked with cleaning supplies, and a worn mop tilted at an odd angle. The man moved slowly, but with practiced familiarity, the kind of gait reserved for those who had walked the same floors for decades. When the janitor looked up, his eyes met Marcus's, and he froze. His weathered face broke into a look of cautious recognition. "Holloway," he asked, voice rough but unmistakably human. He stepped closer, pushing the cart aside and narrowing his eyes as if disbelief clouded his memory. "It is you, isn't it?" Marcus gave the faintest nod. The man smiled, but it was the kind of smile that had learned to carry pain alongside welcome. "You used to work upstairs, right? Back when they still had those old desks with the glass tops. Marketing, wasn't it?" Marcus didn't answer immediately, but the quiet tilt of his head gave the man all the confirmation he needed. The janitor's smile faltered into something softer, something more fragile. "I remember when they let you go," he murmured, his voice low, as if confessing to a ghost. "Said they were restructuring. But we knew, those of us who watched, we knew it wasn't just about performance." He chuckled, but the sound was dry and bitter. "And now you're back. After all these years." "Why?" Marcus turned slightly to face the glass wall of the building again, watching the reflections of strangers move behind the tinted windows. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The janitor's voice softened again. "You don't have to say it. I can see it in your face. You came back because something's changed." Marcus's jaw flexed once, but still no words came. The janitor looked at him for a long moment, then leaned back against the cart, the weariness in his bones pressing into the frame. "You know, when I first started here, they told me everyone who worked in this building mattered. That's what they said. Every role counts. Every job has dignity. But I watched people disappear without cause. I watched suits walk past me like I was a lamp. And I watched people like you, smart, clean, driven, get turned away like stray dogs, while others got promotions just for showing up." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded rag to wipe sweat from his brow. "And still I stayed. Because sometimes you stay not because it's fair, but because you remember who else stayed behind." Marcus's eyes flicked at him, and for a brief second, the two men stood in a kind of stillness that felt older than the building itself. A stillness filled with memory and weight, and the invisible thread of mutual understanding formed through years of watching things happen the wrong way. Then, without warning, Marcus turned and stepped away from the bench, back toward the lobby doors. The janitor didn't follow. He simply nodded once, almost to himself, and returned to his cart, pushing it slowly along the path without looking back. The glass doors hissed open as Marcus approached, his reflection doubling in the mirror-like surface until it vanished at the threshold. Inside, the air conditioning hit like a wave, slicing through the heat still clinging to his suit. The lobby was quieter now, fewer voices, fewer footsteps, only the low hum of the front desk's electronics, and the gentle creak of the ceiling vents stirring overhead. No one greeted him. No one stopped him. He walked slowly toward a dark strip of mirrored paneling along the side wall, just adjacent to the elevators, and stood before it. It wasn't a mirror, not really, just part of the architectural design, meant to bounce light and give the illusion of more space. But the reflection it cast was clear enough. He looked at himself, at the man who had stood outside and bent to retrieve papers no one helped him collect, at the man who had been escorted out not with violence, but with practiced exclusion, at the man whose name had once been on the company roster and now belonged to no list anyone wanted to admit seeing. He noticed the angle of his tie had shifted slightly in the wind. With quiet precision, he reached up and straightened it, tugging the knot tighter, fingers adjusting the collar until everything was aligned. His cufflinks glinted faintly in the lobby light, silver, modest, engraved with the initials MH. He smoothed the front of his jacket with a single motion, squared his shoulders, and stood up straighter, not out of vanity, but clarity. This was not the stance of someone hoping to be seen. This was the posture of someone ready to be remembered. His gaze didn't flicker. His breathing didn't change. But the energy around him did, like a pause before a storm. The kind of stillness that makes birds go silent and trees stop swaying. A kind of silence that wasn't empty, but loaded, with tension, with purpose, with a reckoning that had not yet arrived, but had already taken root in the marble beneath his feet. Marcus remained still, perfectly composed beneath the muted lights of the lobby, his reflection in the mirrored panel frozen in a stance of deliberate silence. Around him, the world ticked forward, unaware that the minute hand had finally struck the hour. A distant rumble outside signaled the arrival of something heavier than the usual flow of traffic, a low, deliberate purr, deeper than the average sedan. It was the unmistakable sound of authority arriving not with noise, but with weight. Through the rotating doors, a sleek black Cadillac came to a slow, graceful halt at the curb just beyond the front steps. The paint gleamed like oil under sunlight, polished to perfection, windows tinted, tires silent against the pavement. A uniformed driver stepped out, tall and composed, his dark suit pristine and movements practiced. He circled the vehicle without urgency and opened the rear door with the precision of someone trained to serve power, not merely transport it. From the rear seat emerged a man in a tailored gray overcoat, dark skin contrasting against a bright gold crest pinned subtly on his lapel. His presence was immediate, like a held breath entering the room. He carried a thin leather portfolio in one hand and walked with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms, not sidewalks. The driver followed a step behind, but said nothing. The man ascended the steps of the building, one hand adjusting the bridge of his glasses, his gaze scanning the lobby interior before settling directly on the security desk. Inside, the receptionist Kristen looked up as the entrance doors opened. The man entered with no hesitation, his steps echoing across the marble floor as he approached the desk. "Good afternoon," he said smoothly, placing the portfolio on the countertop. "I have documents for the attention of the executive office." Kristen blinked, caught off guard by his tone, his presence, and most of all, the name he uttered next. "It concerns Mr. Marcus Holloway." Her hands paused mid-keystroke. "I'm sorry, what was the name?" "Marcus Holloway," he repeated calmly, then leaned in slightly. "He has an appointment with your chairman today." The words landed like a subtle thunderclap. A flicker of confusion crossed her face, then doubt, then a thin mask of professionalism. "I wasn't informed of any such meeting." The man didn't respond. Instead, he opened the portfolio and produced a sealed envelope with a single gesture, sliding it across the counter. This should clarify things. As Kristen took the envelope, the security guard, same as earlier, clipboard now gone, hands behind his back, stepped closer, recognizing Marcus nearby, but still unable to fully comprehend the unfolding picture. Kristen opened the envelope and pulled out a series of legal documents, clean, precise, official, and began scanning them quickly. Her brows furrowed, then rose. Her lips parted, then pressed together again. On the top page in bold print, it read, "Federal Civil Rights Class Action Settlement, Holloway versus Emberhold Corporation, Final Award, $75 million. The following page carried the seal of the Supreme Court, along with the judgment summary. Final and irrevocable resolution. Discrimination on the basis of race confirmed and upheld. Restitution and executive accountability required." She looked up slowly, her face draining of color. Before she could speak, Marcus stepped forward, closing the space between them with the quiet dignity of someone who no longer needed permission to move. He reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and removed a single folded document, crisp, and waited. Without a word, he placed it gently on the desk beside the portfolio. It bore the unmistakable red seal of the court, a circular crest pressed into the paper like a brand of justice finally served. In small, clear type beneath the seal, it read, "Final Order of Resolution Discriminatory Practices Award Delivered. Immediate enforcement in effect." Kristen glanced down at the page, then up at Marcus, then back again. She reached for the intercom button, but hesitated. Her hand hovered, her breath caught. The guard beside her shifted uncomfortably. Marcus said nothing. His eyes remained calm, measured, but in them was something impossible to ignore, something heavier than confrontation, more piercing than accusation. It was not anger, it was reckoning. Behind him, the man in the gray coat gave a subtle nod toward the guard. "This gentleman is not a guest," he said. "He is now a recognized stakeholder by court authority, with immediate right of access. Any obstruction from this point forward constitutes contempt." The words settled like smoke in the air, wrapping around everyone within earshot. Kristen finally pressed the intercom button, her voice suddenly small. "Yes, hi, this is front desk. We have a situation." There was silence on the other end, then a quiet reply. "Define situation." She glanced toward Marcus, then back at the papers. "Marcus Holloway is here, and he's carrying a court order." More silence. Then a tone shifted on the line. "Stand by. Executives are on their way." Kristen lowered her hand, her shoulders visibly tense. She didn't meet Marcus's gaze again. The guard stepped back involuntarily. The quiet in the lobby thickened like fog. Marcus turned his head slightly, eyes resting on the hallway leading to the executive elevators. His stance was unshaken, his breath steady. For years, he had walked through doors knowing that recognition would never meet him halfway. Today, the doors would open because they had no choice. He reached for the folder, straightened the edges on the desk, and waited, not for approval, not for validation, but for the next step in a process already set in motion long before anyone behind that counter realized what they were looking at. The silence that had taken root in the lobby grew heavier by the second, thick with something more than tension, something closer to recognition dawning too late to matter. Kristen lowered her eyes as the security guard stood stiffly, uncertain whether to remain or retreat. The man in the gray overcoat gave Marcus a glance, not for approval, but as a signal. The next door would open not by request, but by necessity. And then came the sound, measured, deliberate, the unmistakable click of high-polished dress shoes against marble. A pause, then another step. From the corridor leading to the executive elevators emerged a tall figure dressed in dark navy, silver pinstripes catching the light beneath the recessed glow of ceiling fixtures. His expression was unreadable, carved from years of courtroom discipline and boardroom warfare. He carried no briefcase, no folder, just a single earpiece in his right ear and a small lapel pin over his breast pocket marking his role, General Counsel Emberhold Corporate. His name was Lawrence Talbot, and Lawrence Talbot never came downstairs. Until now. The staff in the lobby straightened reflexively. One in turn lowered her phone as if caught doing something illicit. The receptionist's shoulders tightened, her fingers frozen on the keyboard. Talbot didn't look at them. His gaze was fixed on one person. "Mr. Holloway," he said firmly, voice calm but heavy with layered intent. "Apologies for the delay." He extended a hand, not hesitantly, but with the same ceremony one might offer a dignitary or a judge. Marcus turned slightly, accepted the handshake, and gave a single nod. "I believe you've been waiting long enough," Talbot said. "Let's not waste any more of your time." With that, he gestured toward the executive elevator, already waiting. Its brushed steel doors open like an invitation carved from obligation. No one else moved. No one else spoke. The weight of the greeting, "Mr. Holloway," hung in the air like a gavel strike. The guard stepped aside as Marcus and Talbot crossed the lobby. The receptionist slowly sat back down, her face pale, her screen still displaying the court order she hadn't believed just minutes earlier. Marcus didn't speak as the elevator doors closed behind him. Talbot remained silent as well, choosing instead to glance at the mirrored panel inside the car, adjusting his posture like a man preparing for a deposition, not a meeting. "There's a lot they didn't expect today," he said finally. "But they'll listen now. They have no choice." Marcus gave no reply. His calm wasn't passive. It was pointed. At the 26th floor, the doors slid open with a soft chime. What awaited wasn't a conference room or a private office, but the executive press room, used for high-stakes investor updates, internal media briefings, and once, ironically, for the launch of Emberhold's Equity and Impact Initiative. The irony didn't escape Marcus as he stepped inside. Half a dozen senior executives were already present, their suits too tailored, their smiles too tight. At the center stood a long oval table with microphones built into the wood, a large projection screen behind it still displaying the company slogan, "Built on Principles, Driven by People." Marcus walked past the first row of chairs. A few mid-level managers looked up, some with genuine curiosity, most with forced neutrality. A few recognized him. Fewer admitted it. At the far end of the room, a small group of legal assistants whispered rapidly, silenced instantly by Talbot's presence. "Everyone's here," Talbot announced. "Let's begin." There was no warm-up, no pleasantries, no coffee offered, no water poured. The formality of corporate hospitality had been stripped bare, leaving only the exposed wires of consequence. Marcus stepped toward the head of the table, but he didn't sit. He didn't reach for a microphone or clear his throat. Instead, he calmly opened his leather folio and placed it on the table with deliberate care. Then he unlatched the brass clasp and withdrew a thick document. pages bound tightly, sections tabbed with color-coded markers, footnotes highlighted in yellow. He placed the stack in the center of the table and slid it forward. One executive reached for it instinctively, but stopped when Marcus raised a single hand. Not aggressively, just enough to freeze movement. Then he withdrew a second copy, and a third, each set slightly slimmer than the last, each clearly pre-prepared. No one asked what they were. They knew. Talbot stepped forward and spoke in Marcus's place. "What you're looking at," he said smoothly, "is a compiled report spanning 36 months of internal complaints filed under HR's Category 4B, Bias or Discrimination Internal Conduct." He gestured toward the main copy. Mr. Holloway took the liberty of sourcing, verifying, and cross-referencing each entry with the company's own personnel logs and third-party arbitration records. The result: 42 distinct instances of confirmed or unaddressed racial bias within this organization. 42. Documented, verified, suppressed. The words dropped like lead. Murmurs flickered along the edge of the table, but quickly died. Marcus said nothing. His eyes moved slowly across the room, pausing not on the faces that looked ashamed, but on those that still tried to calculate. Talbot continued. "Each case represents not just a failure of policy, but a failure of leadership. Many of you in this room were involved, if not directly, then in the chain of oversight that allowed these outcomes to persist. The court settlement does not require this meeting, but Mr. Holloway requested it, not for restitution, but for accountability." Marcus finally stepped back from the table, letting the weight of the documents fill the silence he refused to break. Behind him, the screen flickered. A new slide appeared, simply titled, "Timeline of Inaction." Beneath it, a cascading list of dates, each marked with the name of a department, each followed by a single word: ignored, rejected, dismissed. And still, Marcus didn't speak. He simply folded his hands behind his back and waited, for what came next wasn't a conversation. It was the unmasking of a system. The morning after the closed-door session, the building was quieter than usual, not because there were fewer people, but because the tone had changed. Footsteps were softer, conversations hushed, eyes shifting with the awareness that the center of gravity had moved. Word had traveled fast, not through press releases or announcements, but through the invisible networks of whispers and unread emails suddenly forwarded with subject lines like urgent, HR action required, and compliance concerns immediate. Kristen, the front desk receptionist, did not report for work that day. Her badge had been deactivated overnight. An automated out-of-office response replaced her inbox. The manager who had once shredded Marcus's invitation in the executive suite was seen being escorted out of the building by HR representatives mid-morning, her face a mixture of tight-lipped indignation and dawning recognition that no explanation would be sufficient now. The same security guard who had asked Marcus for identification not once, but twice, had been reassigned without notice, transferred to a remote logistics site far outside city limits, where his new post involved monitoring warehouse deliveries and filing inventory reports rather than managing corporate entrances. Officially, it was labeled as a routine reallocation of personnel. Unofficially, everyone knew what it was. The HR department, which had long functioned as little more than a bureaucratic buffer between employees and accountability, had been issued a sweeping directive by the legal division in partnership with third-party oversight. Every discrimination claim filed within the past 5 years, including those that had been quietly closed, resolved informally, or redirected through procedural delay, was now being reopened under independent review. Names that had once disappeared into silence were now pinned to timelines, indexed in color-coded spreadsheets, and prepared for interviews. Office chatter died out. Coffee breaks shortened. People who had once spoken freely about who did or didn't fit in now checked over their shoulders before saying anything at all. But the most visible shift happened behind closed doors on the top floor, where the conference room that once hosted celebratory strategy launches was now repurposed into a negotiation chamber. Seated at the far end of the long table was the man many had forgotten had any connection to Marcus at all, Frederick Langston, the chairman of Emberhold's board. 5 years ago, when Marcus had submitted a formal complaint alleging discriminatory termination practices. It had landed directly on Langston's desk. And 5 years ago, Langston had refused to forward it for internal arbitration, citing insufficient merit for review. He hadn't responded to Marcus directly. He hadn't needed to. His silence had been the final stamp. Now, under the cold scrutiny of court-mandated reform measures, Langston found himself across the table from Marcus once again, this time with fewer words to shield him. The room wasn't full of lawyers, though legal counsel was present. It wasn't filled with applause, though progress was being made. It was filled with documentation, declarations, terms of accountability. Seated beside Marcus were two representatives from the National Civil Rights Oversight Commission, one a soft-spoken policy analyst in her 40s, the other a younger compliance enforcer with a sharp gaze and a legal pad that never left his hand. They had not come to negotiate. They had come to witness. A large folder sat open in front of Langston, its contents clear and unyielding. The reform agreement, nearly 90 pages thick, outlined structural changes that had to be implemented within 6 months. The establishment of an internal bias response unit, the mandatory reevaluation of hiring practices and promotional criteria, the appointment of an independent cultural advisor reporting directly to the board, and full data transparency on all employee grievances moving forward. Langston scanned the final page, where his signature was required, the pen beside it already uncapped and waiting. For a long moment, he didn't move. His jaw was set, eyes narrowed slightly, as if hoping the weight of the moment might pass if he simply refused to meet it. But Marcus was already watching him, not with bitterness, not even with triumph, but with the quiet, unshakable clarity of someone who no longer needed the moment to prove anything. Langston looked up, met Marcus's gaze, and in that silence, something inside him seemed to shift, not collapse, but yield. He picked up the pen and signed. His hand didn't tremble, but his face betrayed the effort it took to keep it that way. When the signature was complete, the commission representatives gathered the document and slid it back into its folder. Langston leaned back in his chair, exhaled, and did not speak. He didn't need to. His signature had already said everything. Hours later, an internal bulletin was sent to all Emberhold employees via secured email. The subject line was terse: organizational realignment, immediate effect. It outlined the formation of a new equity and ethics division, confirmed the dismissal and reassignment of multiple department heads, and emphasized a company-wide mandate to undergo comprehensive training and evaluation protocols. Beneath the formal language lay something far more profound, an admission that the system had not only failed, but failed loudly and repeatedly. In break rooms and shared office spaces, employees read the message in silence. Some scrolled through quickly. Others stared at the screen, rereading paragraphs they couldn't quite believe had been written. A few printed it out and highlighted sections, as if the printed word made it more real. One junior analyst, who had once been reprimanded for not adapting to company culture, quietly forwarded the email to her father, a civil rights attorney, with the simple subject, "It happened." And in a nearby office, HR's lead compliance officer opened a dusty file that had been marked "Closed, no action recommended," and stared at the name on the first page, Marcus Holloway. She placed it at the top of a new folder labeled "Reopened Priority Review." In the weeks following the policy overhaul and internal investigations, Emberhold's headquarters took on a strange duality. On the surface, the operations continued with their usual pace. Emails sent, reports submitted, meetings held, profits tracked. But beneath it all was an undercurrent, a slow hum of self-examination moving through the building like a current no one could escape. Every floor, from legal to finance to HR, had been issued new protocols, new oversight, new eyes watching, but something deeper had begun shifting, something that couldn't be measured by memos or key performance metrics. People were beginning to look at one another differently, not just as colleagues or competitors, but as witnesses to a system they had helped uphold, knowingly or not. In Conference Room 4B, once a forgotten meeting space tucked away behind the HR wing, a series of open forums had begun under the Equity and Ethics Division. These sessions weren't mandatory, but they were encouraged, and the turnout, surprisingly, grew with each passing day. At the third session, held on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, a young analyst named Elena Wu stood from her seat halfway through the discussion. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The room had already quieted as soon as she moved. She held a notepad in her hands untouched and looked not at the moderator, but across the circle at the others seated in silent rows of folding chairs. "I remember seeing Mr. Holloway in the lobby that day," she said, her voice steady. "I remember hearing the things people said, little comments, questions whispered behind hands, jokes that weren't really jokes. I didn't say anything. I just kept walking." She paused, swallowing once. "I told myself it wasn't my place, that someone else would speak up, that maybe it wasn't what it looked like, but it was. And I knew it." The silence held, heavier now. She looked down, then back up. "I was wrong. I don't want to be the kind of person who stays quiet just because it's safe. I won't be that person again." No one clapped. No one had to. The stillness was its own acknowledgement. Across the room, an older man from facilities management, who hadn't spoken in any prior session, nodded once slowly, as if granting permission for his own reckoning to begin. And across the building, in the lobby where it had all started, a familiar figure stood just beyond the glass doors, waiting for the last shift of the day to end. Marcus had not returned to Emberhold in any formal role. He had declined offers to lead the new ethics division, to join the board's diversity council, to serve as consultant or advisor. His presence had already done more than titles could. But he had agreed, at least for now, to meet with those who asked, quietly, without cameras or statements, without agenda. That evening, as the last workers trickled out of the elevators and exited into the golden wash of early dusk, the lobby lights dimmed slightly and the front doors hissed open. The same guard who had once asked Marcus to leave now approached from the far side of the marble floor. His uniform was different, cleaner, better fitting, no longer burdened with the clipboard or the posture of suspicion. He stopped a few feet from Marcus, hands clasped in front of him. For a moment, neither man spoke. The city moved around them outside, buses passing, streetlights flickering, pedestrians drifting like shadows through the concrete rhythm of the evening. The guard finally cleared his throat, not to speak clearly, but as if needing to remove something heavier than phlegm from his chest. "Mr. Holloway," he said, voice rougher than Marcus remembered. "I just wanted to say," he looked down, shook his head, then forced his gaze upward. "That day when I asked for your ID, when I told you to wait outside, I thought I was just doing my job." His words stumbled forward, clumsy but honest. "I didn't think about what it meant, what it looked like. I didn't think about how I was treating you different. I just followed what I thought were the rules." He paused. "But I see now. That wasn't the rules. That was me not seeing you. That was me protecting a comfort I didn't earn." Marcus didn't respond, but his expression didn't waver either. He let the silence stretch. The guard took a breath. "I can't take it back. But I needed you to know, I've thought about it. A lot." He nodded once, not asking for forgiveness, only acknowledging the debt. "I'm sorry. For what I did, and for what I didn't do." Marcus stepped forward then, slowly, and extended a hand, not ceremoniously, not dramatically, but simply. The man looked at it for a second before shaking it with both of his own. There was no applause, no audience, just two men in a lobby, one walking away from silence, the other having already turned his back on it long ago. Later that week, a new installation appeared in that very lobby, a quiet display case near the entrance, containing a single framed page from the civil case file. Not the settlement figure, not the court ruling, but a paragraph from Marcus's original written complaint, long before lawyers, press, or judgment. "I am not angry. I am not asking for revenge. I am asking to be seen, to be treated with the same dignity that every person deserves the moment they walk through these doors." Above it, etched into the wall in clean serif letters, was a line added by the board after much debate, much hesitation, and finally unanimous agreement. Accountability is not the end of the story. It is where truth begins. Before you go, what part of this story surprised you the most? Was it the silent moments, the quiet justice, or the long-awaited reckoning? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And while you're at it, let us know where in the world you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. If stories like this move you, challenge you, or simply make you think, consider subscribing. We've got more coming your way.